Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In this episode of Paranormal Files, we return to a topic that, more than any other, divides, fascinates, and challenges what we believe we know: the psychic abilities of human beings. Not as myth, not as legend, but as a subject of scientific, military, and academic study. With Sara Gamberoni, we will retrace a journey that begins with the secret programs of the Cold War, moves through remote viewing developed at the Stanford Research Institute, crosses Russian and Chinese research on human energy, and arrives at a far more personal question. What if these abilities are not the privilege of a few, but a natural function that we have simply forgotten? We will talk about remote viewing, psychokinesis, energy, qigong, the mind, and collective resonance. Sara returns to speak after a period of logistical difficulties, with the tone of someone resuming an important conversation left unfinished. She recalls the path already explored in previous episodes dedicated to the so-called natural superpowers of humans, explaining that what struck her most was the discovery that these faculties are not products of imagination, but have been studied and even used in military contexts. For her, the mere fact that armies and superpowers invested resources in developing these abilities already proves their reality. When the military is involved, she argues, it is never just suggestion. This awareness had a profound personal impact. Understanding that the human being, through the power of the mind alone, can help shape their own reality marked a radical turning point. If the mind can generate fear, anxiety, and negative scenarios, as it has in recent years, when collective attention was constantly directed toward alarming news, then that same mind, guided differently, can build something positive. Sara recalls having dealt in the past with very difficult topics, even paying the price of closures and censorship. But encountering the study of psychic abilities changed her perspective, no longer only denunciation, but a real possibility for transformation. From this came the desire to bring to Italy methods that, she says, were developed in academic and military contexts, particularly in the United States. In February of the previous year, she managed to organize a live course dedicated to remote viewing. In just one day, she says, participants would learn the basic protocols to use their perceptive abilities. The method is based on those developed during the Cold War under the so-called Stargate Project, when scientists like Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute systematically studied extrasensory perception. The project now continues with new stages across Italy. According to Sara, remote viewing is not a modern invention. It is an ancient practice, already present in oracles and priestly traditions of the past. Over the centuries, however, these abilities were demonized, associated with witchcraft, and progressively forgotten. The result is that those who today manifest such faculties often interpret them as something supernatural or external to themselves, whereas in reality, they are a natural function of the human being. The discussion then expands to the full spectrum of studied abilities, not only remote viewing with or without coordinates, but also auditory and tactile perceptions at a distance, psychokinesis, materialization, object teleportation, and matter manipulation. It is noted that many documents have been declassified and that an international association dedicated to remote viewing exists. Officially, the project was closed after the Cold War, but according to some interpretations, it may never have truly ended. A point Sara considers crucial is the risk of esoteric organizations. Many people with psychic abilities, she argues, end up absorbed into hierarchical systems that attribute these powers to entities, rituals, or external grants. In reality, according to her view, these faculties derive from no external force. They are intrinsically human. The indirect experience related to Miriam's therapeutic magical brotherhood is also cited as an example of how such knowledge can be channeled within organized structures. The story also touches on superpower collaboration. Despite official rivalries, the United States, Russia, and China reportedly shared research on these phenomena, studying the energetic potential of humans. Here emerges the reference to a universal energy, sometimes linked to the concept of the ether, as an informational field accessible to consciousness. Famous cases are mentioned, such as Nikola Tesla, known for alleged demonstrations of psychokinesis. However, it is emphasized that very few individuals were able to reproduce such phenomena on command, a distinction that separates occasional ability from structured training. In this first part, therefore, the common thread is clear. Psychic faculties are presented as natural human abilities, studied in scientific and military contexts, often misunderstood or manipulated in esoteric settings, but potentially accessible to anyone through discipline and method. Sara continues, explaining that, according to scientists involved in extrasensory perception studies, it was initially unknown how to teach or control these abilities. However, they observed that such abilities tended to manifest spontaneously during periods of intense stress. It is precisely in those moments that phenomena commonly associated with so-called poltergeists occur, moving objects, seemingly inexplicable energetic manifestations. In reality, according to this interpretation, these are not external presences, but repressed psychic energy seeking an outlet, like a pressure cooker that, once a certain threshold is reached, must inevitably release the accumulated excess. Stress acts as a trigger because this energy is regulated by neurotransmitters, i.e., by the brain's neurochemical signals. However, Sara explains, when researchers went to China, they discovered something different. This energy could not only manifest spontaneously, but could also be learned, controlled, and intentionally utilized through specific techniques. At this point, she introduces Nikola Tesla and his vision of the ether as the universal matrix from which everything derives. From this perspective, the ether is an immense reservoir of force, an unmanifest reality that can be made visible through electrical stimulation. Tesla observed that, by applying specific stresses to his capacitors, this energy manifested as sparks. An energy different from traditional electromagnetic energy, capable, according to what is reported, of defying known physical laws, moving not along the path of least resistance, but along that of greatest resistance, without constraints of space or time. Sara connects these observations to studies on the psyche conducted at Stanford, where it was observed that the energy involved in remote viewing phenomena knows no shielding limits. Experimental subjects were reportedly able to act perceptually even inside shielded submarines across the world. The discussion then shifts to the research of Konstantin Korotkov, who further developed Kirlian studies on the human aura. The human body is described as surrounded by a photographable bioelectromagnetic field. Through slight electrical discharges applied to the fingers, Korotkov reportedly obtained images of energetic sparks around the body, interpreted as manifestations of consciousness energy. This energy is also visible during intentional thought emission. When a person sends a thought of love, a flow of biophotons is generated between sender and receiver. Longitudinal waves are mentioned, the same identified by Tesla in his experiments. The human being, therefore, is immersed and permeated by this energy of the void, the ether, which circulates in the body through energy channels akin to the meridians of Chinese medicine, described as true biological liquid crystals. Sara recounts that studies conducted in China, promoted even by leading figures in space technology, observed that children naturally possess large amounts of this energy. With growth, it decreases, but it can be recovered through the practice of qigong, a discipline combining breathing, mental focus, and specific movements to reactivate energetic flow. Master Zhang Baosheng is cited, studied for years, and reportedly supported by the Chinese defense sector. Through qigong, he was said to perform extraordinary actions, breaking stones by concentrating energy at a point, moving iron powder without contact, raising temperature to ignite paper, and treating people by transmitting energy. Sara emphasizes that these videos were made in controlled contexts with official documentation. She also acknowledges skepticism. There are tricks, imitations, and fraudsters. But the presence of imitations does not necessarily imply the non-existence of the original phenomenon. When something cannot be contained, she argues, it is ridiculed or confused. In qigong, energy first restores physical health. When it flows harmoniously through the meridians, it ensures well-being. If accumulated excessively, it would feed the so-called wonderful meridians, allowing psychokinetic manifestations. The foundation of all this is not dispersing energy. The main mechanism of dispersion is mental noise, continuous inner dialogue, automatic thought. In ESP research, this noise would hinder the reception of information. In qigong, it represents the main energetic parasite. A mind that thinks incessantly drains energy from the body, contributing, according to this view, even to illness. To develop psychic abilities, one must therefore stop mental noise, learn to breathe properly, move consciously, re-establish connection between heaven and earth, and recover cosmic energy. Related disciplines such as Russian transurfing are also mentioned, and the discussion returns to video demonstrations, concentrating energy in one point of the body, emitting it outward, influencing matter. Sara reiterates that, according to her documentation, these masters were subject to rigorous controls. The topic of so-called healings is also addressed. At large conferences, it is reported, merely speaking of energy produced spectacular improvements. Energy, resonating among many people, amplifies exponentially. But to activate it, belief in its existence is necessary. Skepticism is the main block. Sara cites psychokinesis experiments, such as spoon bending. Children, free of preconceptions, achieved results more easily. Skeptical adults were the only ones failing, not because they were incapable, but because they were mentally closed. The human body is like a machine with self-repairing abilities. Science itself recognizes this capacity. If the machine is placed in conditions of lower stress and higher energy availability, the self-correction process happens more quickly. It is precisely on this basis, control of thought, energy management, health recovery, that the entire path toward developing psychic abilities is founded. If nature is allowed to act and more energy is simply provided to the system, self-repair occurs more rapidly. Problems arise when the opposite happens, when the machine, so to speak, loses the will to repair itself. Here we enter broader realms, which, according to Sara, deserve further exploration. It is suggested that many explanations already exist, but are contained in omitted chapters of the very disciplines we still study today. Reflection is offered on the economic model. An industry that profits from malaise has no interest in promoting perfectly healthy individuals. Just as planned obsolescence keeps the consumer goods market alive, including cars, by analogy, it is hypothesized that humans might also be inserted into a limited functioning paradigm. The discussion of the invisible is further expanded. In chiropractic and other fields, phenomena exist that are not immediately visible but are not therefore non-existent. The example is radio waves. They are unseen, but activating the right instrument, they can be detected and even have their frequency changed. Without the correct tool, what is real appears as magic. Similarly, a lighter shown to an isolated population might seem like witchcraft. What is ordinary technology for some is supernatural for others. The perspective then widens to cultural relativism. What we define as normal is deeply conditioned by context. The Western lifestyle, continuous work to sustain consumption and debt in exchange for short periods of freedom, might seem absurd to other cultures, just as more nature-integrated communities may seem strange to us. According to this view, if psychic abilities were fully developed, many social structures would lose significance. Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff are cited, who in documentaries like Third Eye Spies describe remote viewing experiments even applied to financial markets. Russian schools specialized in remote viewing are also mentioned, along with the transurfing technique, based on the idea that knowledge and management of cosmic energy can influence reality, generating happiness and abundance. It is argued that figures like Uri Geller were labeled charlatans despite years of controlled experiments. Similarly, Master Zhang Baosheng reportedly had results published even in Nature. According to this narrative, scientific literature has documented these phenomena for decades, while the public remained unaware. The usefulness of exposing fraudsters is acknowledged, but generalizing can lead to denying authentic phenomena. The case of Gustavo Roll is cited, presented as a figure of global significance who was treated unfairly. The conversation further expands into a critique of power systems, media mechanisms, and the management of public narrative. It is said that in end-of-cycle times, it is necessary to broaden perspectives without falling into either credulity or preconceived rejection. Knowledge, it is argued, must arrive gradually. Sudden light blinds, while progressive light illuminates. The central message thus becomes an invitation not to fear. If we do not know our own power, someone else could use it for their purposes. Energy is, in any case, used daily. The difference lies in the direction in which it is oriented. It is emphasized that no act of faith is required, only direct experimentation. A live event with practical ESP and remote viewing exercises is announced, during which participants can touch with their own hands their abilities. As in sports, some will show immediate talent, others will need training, but no one should consider themselves definitively incapable. The principle of the observer in quantum physics is recalled: attention and emotional state influence observed reality. The first step, then, is learning to use one's extrasensory abilities. Toward the conclusion, there is an invitation to rediscover the childlike dimension, curiosity, absence of prejudice, wonder. Psychic abilities are described as natural, artistic skills, linked to the right hemisphere, present in all, yet uniquely expressed in each. There are no sorcerers who grant or take away powers. What is needed is to rediscover what we already possess. We began with a simple yet unsettling question. What if what we call extraordinary abilities were not extraordinary at all, but forgotten parts of ourselves? If the mind has been able to generate collective fear, anxiety, crisis, and tension, then that same mind, aware, trained, directed, can become a tool for creation. This is not about belief. It is about exploration. Paranormal Files continues. See you in the next episode.